Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with my second video in my Underhyped book recommendation series. My co-host and co-creator for this series is Hannah from Lynn Hermione. I will link her book blog down below, as well as her post for this entry in the series. I'll also link the live show we did where we discussed Underhyped books and book hype in general, and especially how that relates to book blogging and like book reviewing. So please check that out if you haven't already. But today we are talking about books that are specifically underhyped in the book blogging world. So whether that is through BookTube or Book Twitter or book blogs themselves, that they just don't get the attention that we think that they should on those platforms. So for this list, there are a couple ways that books could end up on this list. One is that they seem to be very well loved elsewhere in the bookish world. Maybe that's on Goodreads or just like in the general reading public. But for whatever reason, they're not super popular with book bloggers, or we don't see a lot of people talk about them. And then the other way that these could end up on this list is books that I don't really hear bloggers talk about, but I think would be like, I think that a lot of people in the book blogging or booktubing or whatever world would enjoy these. Like there are certain elements where I'm like, this could be a huge hit if people knew about this book. So I'm going to try and be really concise because once again, I have a ton of books to talk about. So I'll try to just hit the highlights. We'll see how that goes. And I think I own actually all of these books, but I don't have all of them with me. So you're going to be getting a mix of like me holding up books and then me just like inserting pictures. So jumping right in with Still Star-Crossed by Melinda Taub. This is a book that I do not really shut up about. So you've probably already heard me talk about it before, but honestly, this book is so good and so underappreciated, and I need more people to read it. I especially think a lot of booktubers or book bloggers would really enjoy this one. So this is set after the events of Romeo and Juliet, so it is inspired by that Shakespeare play, but I want to stress that you don't have to be familiar with Romeo and Juliet. You don't even have to like Romeo and Juliet to enjoy this story. So after the events of the play, we're following Benvolio and Rosaline, who are two minor characters in the original play, and essentially the family feud between the Montagues and Capulets has not let up just because of the tragedy of the play. And so as a way to try and force peace, the Prince of Verona actually arranges a marriage between Benvolio and Rosaline because they are from those two families, just like other branches of the families. Benvolio and Rosaline, neither of them want to be married or engaged to the other one, but they realize that there's a way they might be able to get out of it because it seems like the attempts at peace are being sabotaged by somebody. So if they can solve this mystery and figure out who is deliberately trying to like stoke the hatred between these two families, there would be no reason for them to get married to each other. But of course, as they investigate this and as they spend more time together, they start to actually enjoy being in each other's company. And I love this book so much. The writing is wonderful. I think it has the perfect amount of like Shakespeare flavor or historical flavor without being off-putting. Like I think if you don't read a lot of Shakespeare or like that kind of language, I don't think you need to be intimidated by this. But if you are familiar with that style, I think there's enough of it that it feels I don't know, like period appropriate, I guess, but I just think that it is so well done. The characterization is wonderful. The slow burn hate to love romance is just like impeccably done. This is like a top tier romance. I thought the mystery element was really interesting. I thought the way that the author incorporated certain elements of the play into the story was really brilliant, and I just love this book. More people need to read it. I know it's like not always easy to find or to get a hold of a copy, but if you can find it, please read it. It's wonderful. Next, I have the Dreamdark series by Lainey Taylor. So Lainey Taylor is obviously a very beloved author here on BookTube. Also, I'm going to kind of use BookTube and book blogging interchangeably because I have the most experience with BookTube, but just know that when I say BookTube, I'm talking about like in general book bloggers. So Lainey Taylor is very well loved, but this series of hers does not get very much attention, and I think it's one of her best. This is a kind of middle grade YA, kind of straddles that border really well, and it's a fairy series. Our main character is Magpie Windwitch, and this is just like a really, really interesting couple of books. They're sort of companion books, and I think maybe one of the reasons people don't pick up this series is because we were supposed to get a third book, and so far that hasn't happened. It is still a possibility, but I do think even though like book 2 you definitely want the rest of the story, I don't think it's like one of those experiences where you read book 2 and you feel cheated that you're never going to know how things end. Also, a way to encourage publishers to pick up another book in a series is to buy and read or get from your library the first 2 books. So just saying, if you would want to read the whole series, you should maybe check out the other books. But I really love the fairy magic in these books. I think the characters are really fun. The adventure of these books is just like really enjoyable. I think these are just really fun, clever, engaging adventure stories, and I don't think these books fall into the traps that I sometimes get annoyed with in Lainey Taylor's writing, where it's just like incredibly over descriptive for no reason. I don't feel like these books do that, so I'm a big fan of these. Next, I have Drink, Slay, Love by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a paranormal book involving vampires, and our main character is named Pearl, and this is definitely a very kind of playful take on the vampire tropes. Like, the book starts with Pearl getting attacked by a unicorn, and basically that ends up starting to give her a conscience. And her vampire family are like, wait, so you can go out in the sun now as a result of this unicorn encounter, you should go to the local high school and help us get easier access to blood from people, to victims. And Pearl's like, okay, fine, but she gets there and she starts realizing that she actually might care about these humans a little bit. And this is just really fun. I think that it also does handle some of the like darker aspects of these plots or stories or tropes. I really love Pearl's friendships. There's also a little bit of a romance element that I really liked. Like I said, this is definitely like a funny, even like silly in some places book, but also with some more serious things as well. I also really love what a confident main character Pearl is. Like, she is powerful and beautiful and she knows those things and she rocks those things, and that's kind of refreshing to see, especially in young adult. I know there's a lot of people who still enjoy takes on vampires, and I don't see this one talked about a lot, but I think it's really good. Next, I have The Wolf Wilder by Katherine Rhondell. So I know Katherine Rhondell is better known for Rooftoppers, which I read and I liked, but this book I really, really loved. This was the first Katherine Rhondell book I read. And we follow our main character Feo, or Feodora, and she lives in, I think, Russia with her mother. And so her and her mother are wolf wilders. So what that means is when pet wolves of the Russian aristocracy, when they basically just like abandon them or let them go, Feo and her mother take them in, and they end up kind of retraining them to be wild and to be able to hunt and survive and protect themselves. So that's what they do. And this is just such a lovely story. The atmosphere is beautiful. The friendships between Feo and these wolves is also wonderful. There's a few of them who, like, they've tried to wild them, but they kind of end up becoming attached to Feo and her mother, so they're basically like animal companions at this point. And so the conflict of this book, Feo's mother is taken by this general, and Feo ends up going on an adventure to try and rescue her mother, and she teams up with people along the way who also have been wronged by this general, and so she's trying to get her mother back and protect the people that she loves, and the wolves that she loves as well. And this is just such a lovely story about friendship and family and wilderness, and yeah, there are definitely some parts of it that are hard to read relating to the animals. I will put content warnings, all the ones I remember, because I read this quite a while ago, in the description box. So some of it is like a little rough to read if you get as attached to these wolves as I did, but it's still a really beautiful story, and I think it deserves more attention, especially since it seems like middle grade is becoming a little more mainstream popular in book blogging world. I think this one is a really good pick. Next, I have another series that I talk about a decent amount, but I still don't feel like it's very well known. And that is the Red Abbey Chronicles by Maria Tercenov, translated by AAPI. So I know that translated books, they don't tend to be as like mainstream popular as books that aren't translated, but I really think this one would be a huge hit on BookTube. It's a really excellent feminist fantasy series, and I actually still plan to do a full review on this series at some point. All the books in the trilogy, they can be read in different orders, and they also fit into different age categories. So Maresi, the first book, I think it's mostly middle grade, definitely like upper middle grade. Some of it gets quite dark in the way it references certain things. Then the second book, Naondel, is a prequel, and that one is definitely adult. It's really, really dark, but it's like backstory for the Red Abbey. And then the third book is Red Mantle, and that one is more YA straddling into adult a little bit. All of these books are really wonderful, and I just think the world building of these books is stellar. The characterization is really good. I really like the writing and the setting, and the way that the magic system and the religious system is very female centered, which I think is a really interesting thing to explore. And the premise of this series is just really, really powerful. It's so the Red Abbey is a sanctuary for girls and women who come there fleeing hardship or suffering that is generally of the kind that is inflicted by men. And the first book, Maresi, starts off, a girl has come here for sanctuary, and our main character, Maresi, becomes friends with her. And then it seems like there are people from this girl's past who are trying to find this island and this abbey and take her back. And this is like threatening the safety of the abbey. Just a really wonderful series, really complex too. I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of like the themes and the story elements in that book series, but I think it's a wonderful one. Next, I have 1,000 Nights by E.K. Johnston. Now this is one where like, it's not that people on BookTube don't know about it. I think it's like a lot of people don't like it. And I think the problem with this book is it's a hard one for the right readers to find it, I think, because retellings were like a really big trend. Arguably they still kind of are, and I know that there were several very popular retellings of 1001 Nights, like The Wrath in the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh, which I really didn't like, and that one is very much like romance focused in a very particular kind of way, and so I think that people went into 1000 Nights thinking it might be like that, and it's really, really not. It's a very strange book. I understand why it's not a lot of people's cup of tea, but for me, I just really loved it. It's about the power of storytelling, the power of women's work, and the bond between women who help each other and who give each other strength. And there's a lot of like stylistic choices that I think make it hard to recommend. Like, most of the characters are not named in this book, and that's something that normally really bugs me. I find it very pretentious, but it really worked here because the book is about storytelling. And our main character is the girl who, like the most recent girl, who's been married off to the Sultan, who of course takes a new bride every night and kills her by the morning. And our main character begins telling him stories as a way to survive. And the way that this book talks about storytelling, and like I said, it talks about the alliances between women, the way it handles the conflict of this sultan, like it doesn't romanticize it. This book is definitely not a like romance focused book, which I think again makes it harder to recommend to people who enjoyed some of those other retellings. It's very strange. The magic aspect is also something that I don't remember being like really explained necessarily, so if that bothers you, maybe this isn't a good one to pick up, but if it sounds at all interesting to you, I would give it a try because it is such an interesting and unique book, and I really liked the way that it retold the story of 1001 Nights, and I actually really liked the way that it didn't romanticize it. So if that sounds interesting, do check that one out. Next, I have a nonfiction book, and that is I'd Rather Be Reading by Anne Bogle. The Delights and Dilemmas of the Reading Life. This is a very, very short nonfiction book that is essentially a collection of, like, I guess almost tiny essays, like different writings about the power of books and specific things that that readers feel and go through and think. And this is another one, it's like very hard to explain why this is such an effective and beautiful book. I think it's really hard to come up with a universal book recommendation, but this is basically the closest thing I have. Like, if you love reading, which I think you probably do if you're watching this, I think you could get a lot out of this book. It is heartwarming, it's hilarious, it's very relatable. I think Anne Bogle covers so many aspects of why reading is so important to us. It makes me feel very seen to read this book. It talks about the importance and beauty of libraries. It talks about finding the right book at the exact right moment for you and that particular kind of magic. Yeah, I just love this. I read it from the library and loved it so much that I knew I had to buy a copy, and I plan to reread it many times. And shout out to my friend Giselle from Giselle Bradley, because she specifically recommended this book to me and I absolutely adored it. So then another nonfiction book that I have, that again I think people in book blogging would really be interested in, is The Prodigal Tongue by Lynn Murphy. This is the love-hate relationship between American and British English. I love that cover as well. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's about the differences and similarities between American and British English, and I think this was such an interesting book. I think that this is also a very accessible nonfiction book, so if you're not somebody who reads a ton of nonfiction, I think this could be a great one to get started with. It's very engaging, very readable, really funny, and apart from a couple of like really short sections where Lynn Murphy goes into detail about like parts of speech type things, it's not super technical. Like, it's very well researched and very thoughtful, but it's not like really boring like grammar analysis or anything. I just think this is such a fun and interesting book. I learned so much from this book. And this one doesn't have great Goodreads ratings when I looked at it before, but I think the two major issues with it seem to be, number one, that Lynn Murphy included pop culture sources as well, which I don't think is a problem. She definitely uses like more scholarly resources and texts as well, but I think the fact that she includes things like from like BuzzFeed or like online like memes about like the way Americans talk and things like that, like I think that actually helps give a more full and complete picture of the way that we use language today. So I didn't have a problem with it. And then the other big issue that I saw people had, or some reviewers had, is that Lynn Murphy comes out a little too positively on the side of American English, which Lynn Murphy, she is American, but she has been living in England for many years at this point, and she teaches linguistics there. So she's obviously qualified to talk about both sides, or both dialects, I guess, of English. And I don't know, like, I feel like she did a pretty good job of staying pretty neutral throughout this book. I think maybe the reason that some people thought she was too much in favor of American English is because there are so many negative stereotypes about American English as compared to British English. So by her giving like almost a fair shot to American English, I think maybe people interpreted that as she was too positive about it. I don't know. That's like my interpretation as to why maybe people had a problem with that. But I think if you are at all interested in language and accents, also like the humor involved, and also like historically, there's a lot of, I think, assumptions that we made, I definitely made, about where we get certain words, or like the Americans always using the wrong word for things. And there's quite a few examples showing that American English actually retained the original word or pronunciation, and it was British English that actually changed it, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, I don't think you have to be like an English aficionado to enjoy this book, and I don't even think you necessarily have to be American or British to enjoy this book. It is definitely very focused on those two like styles of speaking or countries, but she also uses examples from other languages, and she also just talks about language in general. So even though the focus is American and British English, I don't think necessarily that you wouldn't enjoy this if you're not American or English, although you will probably get the most out of it if you are. But yeah, I think a lot of people could really enjoy this one, and it makes me sad that it doesn't have great reviews. I have Aisha at Last by Usman Jalaluddin. This is an absolutely wonderful contemporary reimagining of Pride and Prejudice that should get a lot more attention than it does. It was originally published in Canada, and it was like a year later that the US edition came out, so maybe that was part of why a lot of people didn't know about it or didn't pick it up. But I think it's wonderful. People obviously still really enjoy Pride and Prejudice retellings. It's a primarily Muslim cast who all live in, I think it's Toronto maybe? They definitely live in Canada. And it's like really cool seeing how Usman Jalaluddin pulled elements from Pride and Prejudice while also making this very much her own story. I really enjoyed the characters. I really loved the romance. I think this book also covers some like important issues like Islamophobia and racism, and the experience of immigrants and the way that people can judge each other for not practicing something the same way that they do. There's also a subplot related to arranged marriage versus forced marriage, and I think that was really important. I just think it did a really great job of distinguishing those two things. I loved Aisha as a character. I think this is just a really wonderful book that deserves more attention. And again, I think it does a good job of balancing the fun romantic elements with the more serious elements. Next, I have a short story collection, and that is Hungry Hearts, which is edited by Elsie Chapman and Caroline Tung Richmond. I am really surprised this one didn't get a bigger like marketing push, and that I haven't seen many people talking about it. I know that short stories are not for everyone, which actually they're not usually for me, but I have found a few anthologies that I really love, and this is one of them. I did see a couple of like promotion things for it, but overall it kind of went under the radar, and I think that's a shame because this is a really wonderful collection, and it's about the intersection of food and culture, and family and friends and all kinds of relationships, and it's a bunch of different authors who are all writing own voices stories, and there are so many in this collection that I absolutely loved. And another thing I think is cool is they're all set in the same area. It's like this street, or like these couple of streets or neighborhood that is like has a ton of different food shops or like restaurants or kinds of food, and I think having the stories be loosely connected to each other, I think that really helps make this collection feel cohesive, and it's another reason why I think even if you're not usually a short story person, you might really get along with this one. A lot of the stories are contemporary. A few of them have a little bit of magical realism or fabulism, and there's a couple that are more like paranormal or supernatural, and there's even one involving superheroes. So I think that like whatever your tastes, you're probably gonna find at least a couple stories that you really like. I really loved this one, and again, highly recommend it. I think more people should read it. And then next I have Tuesdays at the Castle by Jessica Day George. So I was shocked when I looked online, and on Goodreads this has more than 17,000 ratings, which is like a pretty decent number. And I've only heard maybe 2 book bloggers talk about this series before. I've talked about Jessica Day George before as writing really wonderful cozy fantasy. I have only read this first book in the series, but I'm really excited to read more. We follow our main character Celie, and she lives at the Castle Glower with her family. And one day there's an accident and her parents don't come home. So her and her siblings are obviously really worried. And then it seems like other countries or kingdoms are taking advantage of the situation and trying to like move in on their castle and on their kingdom. But luckily Celie and her siblings are aided by a few characters that they meet, and also by the castle itself, because the castle is like semi-sentient. It can like add rooms and change rooms, and it like has a personality almost. It's like if it likes you, it'll help you find things easier. If it doesn't like you, it can like move doors so that you can't get somewhere. And this was just so fun and so like sweet and cozy. There's definitely adventure and everything. It's not like nothing bad ever happens in these books, in Jessica D. George's books, but overall her books are just very cozy and comforting, and the characters are wonderful. Character dynamics she's really good at, like friendships and family. I just think this is a really fun book, and I think more people like in book blogging land should be aware of it, because it's a lot of ratings for a book that I haven't really heard many people talk about. The Magnolia Sword by Sherry Thomas. I have a full spoiler-free review, so I'm going to be very brief, but this is one of my favorite books of the year. It reads much more like a historical fiction, even though there is like a very slight fantasy element, which is a function of the wuxia genre that Sherry Thomas is drawing from. Wonderful character development. I think it does the girl dressing up as boy trope in a way that actually like examines that and like talks about that. And this is a historical fiction where there are several queer characters, and that is also talked about. I really loved Mulan as a main character. I really loved the love interest like so much. The relationship is really great. I really liked the politics, and I think the fact that I was so engrossed in this story is a real testament to Sherry Thomas as an author, because in general I don't love military focused books and I don't love books involving a lot of traveling, and this book had both those things, and it's still one of my favorites of the year. Next I have another nonfiction, and this is actually my second Katherine Rhondell book on this list, which normally I would try not to repeat authors, but this one is very different and I think it definitely needs to be on this list, and that is Why You Should Read Children's Books Even Though You Are So Old and Wise. This is a tiny, very short nonfiction book about just what the title says. It's about why children's books matter. It's mainly talking about middle grade, although I think it might go into a little bit of YA at some points as well, but I think that this is a book that everybody should read, honestly, not just people who already love middle grade books or even YA books, like I said. I think this is just a really beautiful, thoughtful, brilliantly written exploration of the power of storytelling and the power of storytelling for children, and how it shows how books that are written for kids are not of lesser quality. They're not any less deep. They're not any less meaningful or effective. They can be read and loved by adults as well, but also if they are just read and loved by children, that is still just as valid of a book and of a reading experience. And I just think Katherine Rhondell said in this book so many things that I have been thinking and feeling and trying to articulate for so long. So I just think this is a really wonderful book, and I think it's only available in the UK now, maybe, which might be part of why a lot of people haven't read it. This is actually perfect because I actually got this book as a gift from Hannah, so thank you so much. I obviously adored this. Next I have The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds. This is another book I have a spoiler-free review on. Again, we'll try to keep it short, but Jason Reynolds is a very well-known author. He's, I think, most well-known for Long Way Down, which is also a brilliant book, but I think his other books in general don't get as much attention as that other one. And I think The Boy in the Black Suit is just an incredible portrayal of grief. The character development is wonderful. It's got some moments of lightness and just characters that you love and care about so much. I think Jason Reynolds is just wonderful at characterization. I truly think he is one of the most talented writers for young people who are currently writing, and probably not just for young people, like just period. I think he's one of the most talented writers currently writing. I have loved everything that I've read from him, and I really do think that this book is something special, and I just want like more of his work to get the same attention that Long Way Down does, even though I do love Long Way Down. Next I have the last nonfiction book on my list, and that is I'm Still Here by Austen Channing Brown. This is a very short memoir. I read this only a few months ago, and it was on the recommendation of My Name is Marie Inez, and I'm so glad she talked about this because this was just beautifully written, incredibly powerful. Austen Channing Brown talks about her experiences as a Black woman, especially in spaces that consider themselves very progressive and inclusive and everything like that. Like she talks about in nonprofits, she talks about in church groups and religious spaces, and just like in general, what it is like to be Black in America, to be a Black woman in America. It's very short, but every single page, every single essay packs a punch. Austen Channing Brown writes with such warmth and detail and skill. And I have actually started seeing this one on a few more lists of like memoirs by Black authors or books to read about the Black experience in America. So I do think this one is starting to get a little more traction, which makes me very happy. But I still think that this one should be much more widely read than it is. Melinda actually mentioned this as being a great book to kind of like start out with as you're getting into reading more nonfiction by Black authors, and I would definitely agree that this is like a really great way to kind of get yourself into that. But also, if you've been reading nonfiction by Black authors for a while already, I still think this one has so much to offer, and again, like more people should read this one. And finally, the last book I have, this is actually a recommendation that Hannah did in her last recommendation. She did a whole blog post review on it as well. So normally we try not to do like too much crossover between our lists, but I just finished this one and I loved it, and I think it was kind of cool that like I got this recommendation from Hannah, and like she mentioned it in her last blog post. So she's talked about this before, but I finally got around to reading this book, and it was The Gods of Men by Barbara Kloss. This is a fantastic fantasy novel. We have wonderful character development. We have a really, really interesting magic system, and the way that that intersects with different belief systems is just so interesting and so well done. I really, really liked our main characters of Sable and Jarek, although Jarek, like, he definitely has so much growing to do before he's a likable character, but that's kind of the point, and I think that was handled really well in this book. The world building was wonderful. I thought the writing itself was really good. This is a book that has very few Goodreads ratings. It's definitely not a very well-known title, but I think this is just a really, really quality fantasy novel. Again, check Hannah's review that I will link down below for more information about this. Okay, I have filmed a lot today, so I'm starting to lose my voice, but those are some of the books that I really, really recommend, that I think deserve more attention in like book blogging worlds. These are all books that I think are just fantastic, and I think deserve more attention. And obviously there's always so many books that we want to read, but if any of these sound a little bit interesting to you, I do highly encourage you to pick them up. Don't forget to check out Hannah's post, which I will link down below. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick any of them up now. I hope you found a couple that interest you. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!